Jeh Johnson led the Department of Homeland Security during President Obama's second term and is a former general counsel to the Department of Defense and joins us now. So, Jeh, I want to play the transmission that we heard last night, the communications between Secret Service agents trying to get Vice President Pence to safety during the insurrection, and get your reaction on the other side.
They are on the second floor, moving in now. We may want to consider getting out and leaving now. Copy?
Will we encounter the people once we make our way?
Repeat?
Counter any individuals if we made our way to the.
There's 6 officers between us and the people that are 5 to 10 feet away from me.
Stand by, I'm going down to evaluate.
Go ahead.
We have a clear spot if we move quickly. We got smoke downstairs set by unknown smoke set downstairs by the protesters.
Is that route compromised?
We have this is secure. However, we will bypass some protesters that are being contained. There is smoke, unknown what kind of smoke it is. Copy?
Clear, we're coming out now, all right? Make a way.
Jeh, you've heard a lot of the Secret Service communications. You used to oversee the agency, and also the communications that were testified to about by a national security official working for the NSC who overheard them sending messages to their loved ones and families because they thought their lives were in danger. They would have to be using lethal force to get the vice president out of his second-floor office.
Andrea, I oversaw the Secret Service, and I was also a protectee of the Secret Service for 3 years in their constant company. What you just showed, what we just heard, is probably the thing from last night's hearing that stands out most in my mind. It highlights the proximity to real lethal danger that the vice president, his detail, were actually in that day in the Capitol. We've all seen these isolated clips of the vice president scurrying down the staircase of the insurrectionist in the building. But what you don't have a clear sense of from these isolated clips is how close to danger the vice president and members of Congress actually were. And in my judgment, it's a miracle, and it's a tribute to the Secret Service and the Capitol Police that day no member of Congress was injured and the vice president was not injured, along with his family and White House staff.
Jeh, I do want to play a little bit more. Andrew just mentioned that sound, but let's play the security officer within the White House with the disguised voice talking about the communications over the radio and what they heard from Secret Service members about how much they feared the moment they were in.
The members of the VP detail at this time were starting to fear for their own lives. There was a lot of yelling, a lot of very personal calls over the radio. So it was disturbing. I don't like talking about it, but there were calls to say goodbye to family members, so on and so forth. It was getting, for whatever the reason was on the ground, the VP detail thought that this was about to get very ugly.
And did you hear that over the radio? Okay. What was the response by the Secret Service agents who were there?
Everybody kept saying, at that point it was just reassurances, or I think there were discussions of reinforcements coming, but again, it was just chaos.
This might be a good question for Michael Beschloss a little bit later as well, but I'm just thinking to myself, racking my brain, I can't think of a time where I can imagine that any member of Secret Service might have been fearing for their lives in some way like this, really feeling like they were surrounded, that they might have to use lethal force, or they might have to be saying goodbye to their family members. I know, as you said, you were a protectee for 3 years. When you heard that, what was your reaction?
Stunned. I've never heard anything like that or about that coming from the Secret Service before in history. And I know Secret Service agents. I have, on an occasion, met with every single presidential detail leader going back to John F. Kennedy. I've never heard anything like that. And to me, it really does bring home the real danger that the vice president and his family and his staff and his detail faced that day. That's unprecedented in my judgment.
As you watched last night and you saw the hearing in full, the nearly 3-hour hearing, I wonder what your takeaway was as somebody who served in an administration and, you know, who's been there.
You know, watching last night's hearing, first of all, I have to say, and I've said this before, and Liz Cheney alluded to it last night, this hearing has been a profile and courage among women, while a lot of men are hiding under the desk and in law offices. You have people like Caroline Edwards, the Capitol Police officer, Cass Hutchinson, Sarah Matthews, and most of all, Liz Cheney, who are living up to their oaths and doing the right thing and being unafraid to tell the truth about what happened on January 6th. Last night's hearing talked about the actions of Donald Trump over that 187-minute period. The best analogy I can think of is Donald Trump lit the match that ignited the conflagration at various points along the way, threw gasoline on it, and also happened to be the commander-in-chief of all the firemen and refused to respond to requests to send the firemen to the fire. And January 6th was the very definition of an insurrection. There is a federal criminal statute that criminalizes an insurrection, as well as criminalizing inciting an insurrection and giving aid and comfort to those who participate in an insurrection. I can readily see a federal prosecutor concluding that Donald Trump fits well within that statute.
Yeah, you get to the whole point of, you know, some impatience in some quarters with Merrick Garland, and we know that those investigations we don't know what's going on because they have to be secret. But I would also add Lady Ruby and her daughter from Georgia, the election workers, to your list of women, brave women coming forward, who have provided the texture, the warp and woof, if you will, of the fabric of these hearings. As a former head of Homeland, though, I also want to ask you to react to the missing Secret Service text from January 5th and 6th. So even assuming that there's nothing nefarious going on, after 3 warnings not to erase anything, according to Julia Ainsley, who covers Homeland and has done all this reporting, 3 warnings not to erase anything, how could they even proceed with this migration knowing what was going on? Why didn't they just halt it after January 6th? Where's the oversight? And why wasn't it backed up?
Andrea, as I said to Katie yesterday, Secret Service, I've known this agency for a long time, going back to my days as a federal prosecutor. Secret Service agents are trained to take a bullet for their protectee. They've never been good at, frankly, the back office stuff. I have been their oversight. I have had to, on occasion, admonish senior members of the Secret Service, up to and including asking for the resignation of a director. You have to put some perspective on this. The Secret Service in January of 2021 was in the midst of a presidential transition, protecting an outgoing president who, frankly, is unhinged, an incoming president and his family. The nation was on high alert, and they're responsible for the security of the inauguration on January 20. I am not surprised that in that period, they didn't get the act of data migration completely right. And indeed, I would wonder, I'm puzzled why an information security officer even attempted to do that during this very intense period for the Secret Service. The inauguration, around the inauguration, the transition, and the run-up to a UN General Assembly are probably the 2 most intense periods in the life of the agency, the Secret Service. So I'm not sure why they even attempted to try a data migration, but it's something that the Secret Service, frankly, has never been good at, managing stuff like that.
That is interesting, the timing of that, as you said, around those really high-profile events. Andrea, did you have one more?
Just very quickly, the fact that Mike Pence was ordering actions from the Pentagon because the President of the United States refused to even take a call from the Pentagon, that's out of the chain of command.
Yeah, the
Thank
vice
goodness.
president's not in the chain of command. Neither is the chairman of the Joint Chiefs. And it's a reflection of the, frankly, unstable situation we faced in the last days of the Trump administration, where you have a president who's checked out, an acting Secretary of Defense, an acting Secretary of Homeland Security, an acting Attorney General. And at least we had some people left in the government at that moment who took their oath to the Constitution seriously.